What's up, everyone? Have you ever wondered how to write a piece of music? Have you ever asked yourself, where do I even begin? How often have you been faced with that blank staff? Do you just start writing and you stop when you feel like it's done? I mean, if that's the case, there's nothing wrong with that. But what if there's a way to avoid the frustration and anxiety of that moment, of that blank page staring you in the face? Let's find out today. My name is Matthew Arreguin, and I'm a composer and cellist, and I've faced this same problem which probably every composer since the beginning of time has faced. Where do you start when you want to write a piece of music? Now, I'm not going to give you a specific tool or method that's going to write the piece for you, right? We're not AI. I'm not going to say you can do this with these chords and these melodic ideas, and that's how the piece is going to get made. No, that would be writing the piece for you, and I respect you too much to do that. I would rather provide you with the concept or the idea that has been helpful for me and is far more flexible and malleable, which can be adopted in any style or genre so that your music can be more meaningful and impactful for you. So, just to set this up right, to give you context, in 2017, I started painting again. And this might sound like a detour, but it's really related. And I hadn't really been painting for years, since high school. And as I was relearning this process of painting, I realized that one specific technique from painting could be borrowed in music composition, and that was preparing the palette. Now, preparing the palette is the process of preparing colors when you're going to create a painting. So in the case of the highest paid artists, they have assistants who do this for them. Like you can think of an artist like Gerhard Richter. He has assistants who will mix his yellows and his blues and his whatever. I mean, those are primary colors, so you wouldn't maybe necessarily need to have them mixed. But if you're going to do something outside of those colors, he would just say, mix me these colors X, Y, and Z, and then he would start painting. They would put them in his workstation, and that's one less thing that he has to think about to get to his creativity. Why can't we think about the same thing as composers? Now, obviously, we don't necessarily have assistants, but in a lot of ways, depending on the style of your music, the colors have already been mixed, so to speak. Right? If you're writing predominantly triadic music or diatonic music, and you're using sort of traditional chord progressions, even if they're coming from a specific genre like jazz or pop or whatever it is, you're already kind of working with things that are more or less baked into the style. So the palette has already been prepared for you. If you're writing contemporary concert music, the metaphor of the palette still kind of applies. There are certain things that are baked into contemporary concert music, but a lot of the time, it feels like we're starting from scratch. So how do you deal with that? Now, here's what I've been doing for the last several years, and I basically see there being two effective approaches. The first one is working outside time. Now, the term outside time comes from the composer, theorist, mathematician, architect Yanis Xenakis, and an example of an outside time structure is a scale, a chord, or basically any kind of abstract idea that doesn't have a specific rhythmic or temporal identity. Now, an example of this was in 2018, I started writing a piece for cello solo that focused very heavily on harmonics and multiphonics. The resulting palette was a large collection of possibilities. Once I understood the scope and the nature of my materials, I could just go straight to composing, and I wrote two pieces this way. Now, if you're interested in hearing what they sound like, you can check out the links in the description. But this is not the only method that has worked for me. Another method is inside time. So this is when your ideas literally move in time, when they have a specific rhythmic or harmonic structure. A chord progression I would consider as an inside time structure. Now, even if it doesn't have any temporal or rhythmic information, the successive events are fixed. And so it must be an inside time structure, if that makes sense. So like if it's a 1-4-5-1 progression, then it's an inside time structure because linearly it must unfold in that specific sequence. Another example would be a specific rhythmic idea. So if you have like a certain pattern that you want to use, that's also an inside time structure because the sequence of events and the distances between the different attacks of this rhythm are fixed. Another way to think about it is that when you are working from beginning to end. When you start a piece and you write from left to right, like many of us do very frequently, you can consider it as a generative method for writing music, to accumulate ideas, to understand the way that the music unfolds in real time. So one of the things that often happens with composers is that when you do this initial left to right generative procedure, it requires a ton of effort. It puts a lot of strain on your creativity. And so if you consider it as a generative process of accumulating a palette, then you're able to detach from the results and bypass analysis paralysis. Now, once you have some contrasting materials, you can start to categorize them with simple adjectives. For example, you can say, this is my trill character, this is my sustained texture with lush harmony, this is my low explosive character, this is my high percussive character, and so on. Now, I tend to refer to these as characters because, like in storytelling, the piece unfolds to highlight these different characters in different contexts and how they react to each other. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to follow a strict narrative, although this works for some composers, just that you understand the function of your ideas and the consequences or reactions that these can trigger. So going back to the palette metaphor, it's like the way that red mixes with yellow, or green with blue, or purple with white. But if you never had these colors prepared, it might have never occurred to you to mix them, right? So once you feel you understand the way your ideas are working, you can start to imagine structures and forms that bring out more dimensions of the music. Another thing is, when you have already generated the materials, it allows for you to have more free space in your mind to improvise within your music. This is what happened to me when I was working on this cello solo I mentioned earlier, is that I had my palette already mostly fleshed out, but that doesn't mean that I was not able to veer off into a different direction as I wrote the piece. It actually encourages it. If you're not, as I said, constantly tied up cognitively generating new materials, then you can sort of start from a higher position in the development of the piece to then push it another level higher. So it's sort of like you create a staircase of yourself for your ideas so that you can go much further with them and you can develop them into a much more rich result. So as I said, this is not a tool or a specific method. It's just the mindset and the concept of creating a palette of colors that's available to you so that you can create something that's more rich in possibilities, that's more impactful and meaningful for you as a composer. Now, I hope that this was valuable for you, and if you like these kinds of videos, then let me know what you thought in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.